Confusion has a way of making you feel like something is wrong with you, as if clarity has slipped through your fingers and left you stranded. But there is a stage of growth where confusion is not a malfunction, it's a symptom of evolution. Clarity often disappears right before a new chapter forms because the mind is losing its old map while the new one hasn't been built yet. Meaning systems don't update smoothly, they collapse first. And when they do, the familiar coordinates you use to navigate your life stop working. Decisions that once felt obvious now feel unclear. Certainties dissolve. Direction blurs. This can feel like chaos, especially when identity is shifting at the same time. But not knowing is not an error here. It's part of psychological development. Nothing makes sense because the framework that once made sense of everything has already fallen apart. The confusion is not random. It's what remains when the old meaning system can no longer carry you. This is why so many people mistake this phase for being lost. But what's actually happening is that you're between identities. Identity transitions feel empty, unstable, and often lonely, because identity is what organizes your experience of reality. When it loosens, the world feels unfamiliar, even if nothing externally has changed. The ego panics in this space because it relies on definition to feel safe. It wants labels, roles, and narratives it can point to and say, "This is who I am." When it can't do that, it interprets the gap as danger. Thoughts like, "I don't know who I am anymore," start to surface, and they carry a lot of fear. But that statement is often a sign of progress. It means the old version of you has already ended. The confusion isn't proof you're failing. It's proof the identity you were living from no longer exists in the same way. Beneath the uncertainty, something quieter is forming. Your future self doesn't arrive with a clear outline. It begins as a set of refusals, a loss of interest in old roles, a subtle pull away from ways of being that no longer feel honest. The confusion is the space where that new self is assembling. At the same time, your body is often ahead of your mind. Long-term stress keeps the nervous system in survival mode, and when that mode finally begins to shut down, the experience can feel strange. Emotional instability often follows not because something is breaking, but because the body is recalibrating. When survival ends, peace doesn't always feel peaceful at first. It can feel like boredom, emptiness, or dullness to a system that learned to equate intensity with safety. Calm feels unfamiliar. The constant background tension fades, and without it, the mind doesn't know how to interpret the quiet. You might feel unmotivated, disconnected, or emotionally flat. But this isn't regression. It's regulation. Your body is learning a new baseline, one that doesn't require constant alertness. That learning curve feels senseless because your nervous system has never lived here before. It's adjusting to a state where it doesn't need to brace, and that adjustment can temporarily feel like something is missing. As this reset happens, old patterns begin to lose their grip, and that can feel like losing control. Habits, distractions, and coping mechanisms that once gave you relief stop working. The things you used to lean on, busyness, stimulation, overthinking, emotional loops, no longer entertain you the same way. This creates a withdrawal-like experience. The mind wants to restart the old cycle because repetition feels stabilizing, even when it's unhealthy. Familiar loops provide predictability, and predictability feels like control. When those loops collapse, confusion rushes in. You're no longer being carried by habit. You're no longer distracted from the deeper questions. And without those familiar structures, the mind feels exposed. This is why the early freedom feels like disorientation. When old patterns fall apart, the first thing you feel is not relief, but uncertainty. That uncertainty is not a sign you're going backward. It's the first sign you're no longer being managed by repetition. In this space, many people experience what feels like a meaning vacuum. Everything starts to feel pointless, flat, or empty. This can be deeply unsettling because meaning is what gives effort a reason. But during transitions, meaning often expires before it renews. The old story ends before the new one begins. And in the silence between them, nothing seems to matter in the way it used to. This psychological quiet is not nihilism. It's absence. The absence left when a story that once organized your life can no longer do its job. The danger here is forcing purpose too early. When you rush to assign meaning just to escape discomfort, you often choose a direction that isn't true. False purpose can feel motivating in the short term, but it recreates the same emptiness later because it's built on an outdated identity. Real meaning doesn't return through analysis. It returns through lived alignment, through choices that feel honest rather than impressive. Nothing makes sense right now because the old story can't carry you anymore, and the new one hasn't been lived yet. This is why the in-between feels unbearable. The mind is wired to resolve uncertainty quickly. It would rather choose the wrong path than stay in ambiguity. Stability feels safer than truth when you're disoriented. But this is the stage where rushing is most costly. If you choose direction just to feel grounded, you often lock yourself into another cycle that doesn't fit. Learning to tolerate ambiguity without panic is not passive. It's a skill. Staying present in the gap without demanding answers allows the deeper process to complete itself. Clarity is not missing because you haven't tried hard enough. It's missing because it hasn't finished forming. The gap is not an error in the process. It's where integration happens, where identity reorganizes without being forced into shape. What makes this phase especially challenging is that it rarely comes with reassurance. You don't get signs that say, "You're doing this right." From the outside, it can look like nothing. From the inside, it can feel like everything is unstable. Many people turn back here. They return to old roles, old patterns, old identities, not because those things were fulfilling, but because confusion felt worse than familiarity. But confusion is often the doorway. It marks the threshold of real change. It's the point where the old life no longer works, but the new one hasn't revealed itself yet. Trusting the internal shift without proof is what allows the transition to continue. If nothing makes sense right now, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're no longer living the old life, but you haven't learned the new one yet. The confusion is not the problem. It's the passage. It's what happens when meaning systems collapse, identities loosen, nervous systems recalibrate, and old patterns lose authority all at once. This phase doesn't ask you to fix it. It asks you to stay with it, to recognize that disorientation is not failure, but evidence that something fundamental has already changed inside you. The old map no longer applies, and that's why you feel lost. But you're not lost. You're between worlds. And this is exactly where clarity is born, not as an idea, but as a way of being that can only emerge once the old one has fully let go. As the confusion stretches on, something subtle but important begins to happen beneath the discomfort. Your relationship with certainty starts to change. At first, the absence of clarity feels threatening, as if you're standing without ground beneath your feet. The mind reacts by scanning for conclusions, labels, or decisions that could restore a sense of stability. But when those attempts fail, when no answer fully satisfies, a quieter realization begins to emerge. You notice that you're still here, still functioning, still breathing, still moving through days, even without a clear story to hold everything together. This realization doesn't remove the confusion, but it softens its grip. You begin to see that not knowing hasn't destroyed you. And that recognition alone starts to rewire how you relate to uncertainty. This is often the moment when people first glimpse a deeper layer of trust. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in their own capacity to remain present without immediate resolution. You stop fighting the confusion quite as hard. Instead of asking, "How do I get out of this?" you find yourself wondering, "What is this trying to show me?" That shift matters. Confusion loses some of its menace when it's no longer treated as an enemy. It becomes information, a signal that the old ways of understanding no longer apply. The collapse of meaning systems is not just an ending, it's a clearing. and clearings feel empty before anything new takes root. As identity continues to loosen, you may notice how much of your previous sense of self was built around answers, knowing who you were, knowing what you wanted, knowing where you were headed. When those answers disappear, they can feel like the floor has dropped out. But identity that depends entirely on certainty is fragile. It can only exist as long as the world behaves predictably. What's forming now is something less brittle, an identity that doesn't require constant definition, one that can hold ambiguity without collapsing. This is why the future self doesn't arrive with clarity first. It arrives with tolerance. Tolerance for not knowing. Tolerance for being undefined. The confusion is training you to exist without immediately turning experience into explanation. Your nervous system plays a central role here. As it continues to recalibrate, you may notice fluctuations that feel contradictory. One day you feel calm, almost detached. The next day you feel restless or unsettled without a clear reason. This inconsistency can be alarming if you expect linear progress, but regulation is not a straight line. When a system leaves survival mode after long-term stress, it doesn't immediately settle into smooth peace. It tests new states. It oscillates. It learns through experience what safety feels like without intensity. Calm can still feel foreign, so the body moves in and out of it, gradually building tolerance. What feels like emotional instability is often the nervous system experimenting with a new baseline. During this experimentation, the loss of old coping mechanisms becomes more noticeable. Distractions that once filled empty moments now feel hollow. Overthinking no longer produces answers. Busyness loses its anesthetic effect. This can leave you face to face with the rawness of not knowing, which is uncomfortable but deeply instructive. Without constant stimulation, you're forced to encounter your internal landscape directly. And what you encounter is not a clear directive, but a deep fatigue with pretending. Pretending to know. Pretending to care. Pretending to be motivated by things that no longer move you. The confusion sharpens because the usual escapes are gone, but that sharpening is what makes honesty possible. It's here that many people are tempted to choose prematurely, to grab onto any identity, any purpose, any direction that offers relief from ambiguity. The mind would rather be wrong than undefined. But there's a cost to that choice. When you rush to fill the gap, you often build the next chapter from the same assumptions that just collapsed. The new path looks different on the surface, but it's powered by the same old engine underneath. This is why the gap matters. It prevents immediate substitution. It forces a pause long enough for deeper values to surface. Values that aren't inherited from habit or fear, but discovered through lived discomfort. Staying in the gap requires restraint, not passivity, but patience. It asks you to resist the urge to explain yourself, even to yourself. To allow days where nothing feels meaningful without turning that feeling into a verdict about your life. To let confusion exist without interpreting it as failure. This doesn't mean you do nothing forever. It means you don't rush to resolve what hasn't finished unfolding. The in-between is not wasted time. It's integration time. It's where your nervous system, identity, and meaning structures slowly come back into coherence without being forced into alignment too soon. As this integration continues, you may notice subtle shifts that don't feel like breakthroughs. A growing intolerance for what feels false. A quiet refusal to engage in dynamics that once defined you. A sense that certain doors are closed, even if you can't yet see which ones will open. These shifts can feel anticlimactic, especially if you expect transformation to arrive with clarity and confidence. But real change often announces itself through subtraction, through what you're no longer available for, through what no longer holds your attention. These are not losses. They are boundaries forming from the inside. Gradually, the confusion begins to change texture. It may still be there, but it feels less hostile, less urgent. You stop trying to solve it and start living alongside it. And in doing so, You create the conditions for something new to emerge organically. Meaning doesn't return as a fully formed story. It returns as alignment in small choices, as actions that feel right without needing justification, as a sense of coherence that you recognize in your body before you can articulate it with your mind. This is why meaning returns through lived experience, not analysis. You don't think your way out of confusion. You live your way through it. One of the clearest signs that this phase is doing its work is a shift in how you relate to time. The pressure to figure it out softens. You stop measuring your worth by how quickly you resolve uncertainty. There's a growing sense that forcing answers would actually delay the process. This doesn't make you complacent. It makes you attentive. You become more sensitive to what resonates and what doesn't, even if you can't explain why yet. That sensitivity is the foundation of the next chapter, not certainty, but attunement. Eventually, moments of clarity do arrive, but they're quieter than expected. They don't feel like revelations. They feel like recognition. You realize that something you once struggled with no longer has power over you, that a choice you feared now feels natural, that a direction you couldn't see before now feels obvious, not because it's dramatic, but because it fits. When this happens, it's often surprising how little effort it takes. The work was done in the confusion, in the not knowing, in the willingness to stay present when nothing made sense. This is why confusion is not the problem. It's the doorway. It's the threshold you cross when the old life no longer applies and the new one hasn't been learned yet. Many people turn back here because the discomfort feels unbearable. But turning back only restores familiarity, not truth. Moving through requires trust without proof. Trust that the internal shift is real, even when the external world hasn't caught up. Trust that not knowing is not emptiness, but potential. If you're here now, feeling disoriented, undefined, unsure, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means the old meaning system has collapsed and a new one is forming at a deeper level. The confusion is not a sign that something went wrong. It's a sign that something fundamental has already changed. You are no longer living from the old life, but you haven't yet learned how to live the new one. That learning can't be rushed. It unfolds through patience, honesty, and presence. This phase doesn't ask you to fix yourself. It asks you to stop pretending you already know who you are becoming, to let the question remain open long enough for the answer to be lived rather than imagined. Confusion here is not failure, it's initiation. And if you allow it to do its work without fleeing from it, it becomes the passage through which clarity eventually arrives, not as certainty, but as a way of being that no longer needs the old map to move forward.